Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. The case that we're going to be looking into today is the abduction and the murder of the Groene family. And they were actually stalked before they were attacked. I'd just like to let you know, I mean no disrespect to anyone I'm going to talk about. I've just gathered this information off the internet and compiled it into a video for educational purposes. The Groene family was such a happy family of 5 that consisted of Brenda at the age of 40, Mark Mackenzie at the age of 37, then the 3 children. We have Slade, who was 13, he was the eldest. There was Dylan, who was 9, and Shasta, who was 8 years old. They all lived together along Lake Kirkdeer Lane. And I apologise if I've said that wrong. I probably have, I don't know how to pronounce it, so my apologies for that. And that was just outside of the city of that name, which I'm not going to say again. They was generally just this loving and happy family. They enjoyed spending time with friends and family and each other and everyone, and they were just living this very normal life. That was until it all changed on the 16th of May in 2005. On the 14th, which was the day before the incident, they had a barbecue, they had family around, they had friends around, they enjoyed it. Everything seemed fine, everything was normal, everyone had a good time, and then they went home. The family then went to bed. As I said, everything seemed like it was just like any other day, but unfortunately what they didn't know was that they had been being watched for the last few days by a man with his binoculars, and this man was called Joseph Edward Duncan, and he was a serial killer that was just about to claim his next victims. Joseph would actually later confess to the murder of 3 young children within the last 9 years. But at the time, no one knew how dangerous he was. And he had become obsessed with this family, and to this day, no one knows why. We don't know the reason for this. We don't know why he fixated on this family and why he did what he did, but he did. On the 15th, as the sun rose, Joseph approached the Groene family's house with a hammer. Shasta was actually woken up by a mother who had stated that there was a man in the house and he didn't want them there. That was the first time she saw Joseph, and she said that he was dressed in all black. At this point, Mark and Brenda really did believe that he wanted money off them, that it was a burglary or something like that, and so he told him that we don't have any money, in a slightly raised voice by all accounts. Unfortunately, that's not what he was there for. He wasn't there to rob them. He was there for a much more gruesome intent. He told Mark not to raise his voice or he would shoot him in the head, and that obviously petrified the entire family. He used zip ties to tie up the hands and feet of the adults along with Slade. He then laid them face down, and once they were on the floor, he tied up the wrists of Dylan and Shasta, and he led them outside. He went back into the house armed with his hammer, and that's when he started attacking the rest of the family. He killed Brenda and Mark, all while the 2 siblings were outside listening to it all. Listening to the screams and the cries of the families, and it must have just been so terrifying and so awful. As they watch in horror, they see Slade come out the side of the house. He must have slipped his restraint. He was bleeding, so Joseph had already hit him inside, and even though he'd slipped his restraints, he hadn't slipped Joseph, because Joseph just came running out after him and he hit him over the head with the hammer again. That was when he bundled Shasta and Dylan up into his red Jeep Cherokee and he began to drive away. Shasta recalls looking back in terror and seeing Slade dragging himself to a picnic table that was in their yard. She remembers him sitting up and then he just lied down. He was bleeding very badly and he lost his life on the bench that day. Joseph Duncan had just brutally murdered Brenda, Mark and Slade, and he was then driving away, kidnapping the youngest 2 children. The next day, a neighbour spots blood on the door and calls the police. Police go in, they find the bodies of Brenda, Mark and Slade, and they realise quickly that the cause of death was most likely blunt force trauma to the head. Police went inside, they found all these blood spots everywhere, splatters, they were just everywhere, obviously showing how many times he must have hit them, and it's obviously gone everywhere. They realised that the bludgeoning was severe because of how much blood there was everywhere. Soon enough, the police would find that Shasta and Dylan were missing, and they tried everything they could to get these children back. They set out an Amber Alert, they put up these billboards, they did everything. media appeals just to get these kids' faces out into the public. The public are such a useful tool when it comes to missing children. If they ever turn up anywhere at a gas station to buy something or anything like that, they can ring the police to tell them that that's where they are. So they tried doing that really early on, and it is so helpful because the more earlier on you get it out and the more people you make aware, the better your chances are of getting the children back safe. What the police didn't know though was that Joseph had already taken them across the border and they were at a campsite 100 miles away. The campsite was just outside St. Regis, Montana. And Joseph would make sure that he was with the children at all times, including going to the toilet. So Shasta does remember that made her very uncomfortable. Joseph would make sure that he was with them at all times, including going to the toilet, which would obviously make them so uncomfortable. This man would just get enraged and become really angry out of nowhere. If the children did something, he'd just get so angry, and he'd mainly take that out on Dylan. He was often really mean to Dylan, and it was felt like the kids were going to have to fight for their life. At the age of only 8 and 9, in a fit of anger, Joseph actually grabbed the hammer once, and he said, "You see this hammer? This is the hammer that I used to kill your family. They are not alive and you will never see them again." And of course, this would have destroyed the children. They would have been so upset, they would have been crying non-stop. It was their family, and this man had just taken all of them away from their family and brutally murdered them. Joseph would torment the children and abuse them physically as well as mentally, and the children were terrified, and they didn't know if it would ever end. Both Shasta and Dylan were taken to other locations where they were repeatedly sexually abused and tormented and tortured for 6 weeks. It was said that they drove long distances and stayed at 2 different campsites. During this time, Shasta would do everything that she could to keep herself and her brother alive. She kind of took charge of the situation, which is so brave. She was only 8 and she was so amazingly brave. She promised Dylan that they would get out alive and that they wouldn't stop fighting. It was her way of comforting her 9-year-old brother. As I said, he would torment the children, and on one occasion he actually took the children out carrying his sawn-off shotgun. I believe they got him angry or something like that. He just got angry and he shot it at a tree. Now, a shotgun, as you can imagine, would have took out a huge chunk of that tree, and he said, "That's what will happen if you don't listen to me." These 2 little kids must have been terrified out of their minds. Their family had been murdered, they'd been kidnapped, and their lives were being threatened. And they were just so brave, and it just totally breaks my heart that they had to go through something as traumatic and horrible as that. They were only 8 and 9 years old. To the children, it felt like it went on forever, and they didn't even know if they would survive. He would go on to threaten to kill them on several occasions if they didn't do what he said, and he would just say these horrible things to them all the time. If Dylan and Shasta were kind of showing more interest in each other than him, he would beat Dylan up and things like that, and he would get really angry, and he would mainly target Dylan. And Dylan was actually starting to lose hope that he might get out of this thing alive, which is just horrendous for a little 9-year-old boy to even be thinking. But Shasta did everything she could think of at 8 to keep her and her brother alive. They were both subjected to horrendous things, but it seemed like he would target Dylan more. Dylan got the brunt of it all. And Shasta would try and keep him away from her brother. She would take on the role that is normally taken on by an older sibling. Usually an older sibling would comfort the younger one. I know there was only a year difference, but that's generally what would happen. They're slightly older and generally a bit more responsible. And so that's what they would do. They would just comfort their younger sibling. But Shasta took on that role. She would comfort her older sibling, probably because he was sort of the most targeted and things like that, and that was just so brave. She would ask Joseph about his family and things like that, and that would kind of take his attention off Dylan for a while, which is just such a smart thing to do. And that would work for a while. Shasta asked if she could meet them one day, and he said he was going to take them home, and it improved the way that he would treat them. After this, he told the children to write a letter to their biological father. It said, "Dear Dad, we miss you very much. Me and Dylan know what happened to Mum, Dad and Slade, and we both feel very sorry for them. And we both miss you, Jesse and Vance, and we might see you guys again." This letter would actually never be sent. It was like he was constantly trying to play mind games on the kids, allowing them to believe that they would get out of it safe and sound. A few days after that, Joseph was around the side of the Jeep with Dylan, and Shasta was on the other side of it, when she heard this loud bang and she just instantly froze. She didn't know what to do. She went around the side to see Dylan had been shot in the stomach. Joseph then approached Dylan with his gun to his head and he pulled the trigger. Now nothing came out, so he reloaded it and Dylan was pleading, no please don't. And Shasta tried to stop him, but he just shoots him once more, killing Dylan. He actually said that he had accidentally killed Dylan. I believe he stated that he was rooting for a beer in a plastic tub with his shotgun, obviously, which he kept with him all the time. And it accidentally went off and it got him in the stomach. And he killed him because he didn't want Dylan in any pain. And he was crying and things to Shasta telling her this. So how true that is, we just don't know. Shasta didn't know what to think and she was just numb. For a week, I believe she didn't even speak. She'd literally just seen her brother get murdered right in front of her eyes. I know a parent and her other brother had just been murdered and she could hear them, but she didn't actually see it. And that one she did see, and it must have been traumatic. This is when things started to come to a head because he began asking this 8-year-old little girl how she wanted to die. Did she want to be shot like her brother, which would be quick and painless, or did she want to be strangled? And she thought about it and she picked that she wanted to be strangled. She realised that she had more of a chance of talking him out of it whilst being strangled than she would have ever done being shot and murdered that way. So he put her down on the floor and he began strangling her with a rope. As her sight was fading and obviously she couldn't get in any air, she mustered up enough breath to say one sentence. She pleaded with him and she said the words, "Please don't, Jet." Now, Jet was his nickname, and whenever she used it, he always sort of softened up around her and was kind of more pleasant to him. And it was her last-ditch attempt at survival, and it worked. He released the rope, he began crying, and he said, "I can't do this." This little 8-year-old girl had managed to get through to this man, to get inside a serial killer's mind and touch something. It was just incredible. After this, he said he wanted to take her home and asked her if she wanted to meet his mum, and she said yes. Somehow, Shasta had managed to get Joseph to show her mercy. And on the way, they stopped at this convenience store in Kellogg near Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and they were caught on CCTV there. As they get closer to home, Shasta can see her school, she can see her friends' houses, and she even saw the billboard of her and her brother who were missing. And that obviously upset her because he was no longer there. She'd literally witnessed him be murdered, and it really, really upset her that Dylan's life had been stolen. And she remembered thinking that she could literally just jump out right there and then. Maybe knock on someone's door, get some help. But one wrong move could set him off, and he would probably not give her a second chance. The next time he probably would murder her. She had to be smart and she had to make the right move. The pair stopped at a Denny's restaurant around 2 a.m. on the 2nd of July in 2005. This was when a waitress went to serve them. And this table was her only table, so she only had them to focus on. And she just couldn't take her eyes off Shasta. Her name was Amber Dean, and she recognised Shasta kind of immediately. She really, really thought that this girl was the missing girl. From all of the media, the billboards that she'd literally seen everywhere. She stated that the man that Shasta was with, in her own words, was dead in the eyes. And that this little girl didn't do anything without his permission. As Shasta ordered a milkshake, Amber went back to her boss and said that they needed to call the police. She was pretty sure that that was Shasta Groene. And she literally said, "If I'm wrong, I'll pay for the food, but we just need to get some help up here." The manager, Linda Olsen, made the call to the police as Amber sort of stalled the food coming out.
I've got a little girl here with a tall gentleman, and she looks so much like that Shasta.
Okay, are they still in the building?
And we're not sure, you know, she looks so much like her, and I don't know.
All right, we'll have someone start that way.
Whilst waiting for the police to arrive, a couple of customers actually positioned themselves in a way in which they were blocking the exit, so he couldn't leave until the police actually came. When the officer walked in, Shasta was terrified that Joseph would be able to talk his way out of this one and she would be left with him. That's just how her 8-year-old mind was working at the time. He approached the pair and he asked Shasta what her name was. She looked up to Joseph to see what he was going to say, and he said to her, "You can tell him." So she's told him that her name was Shasta, and Joseph was arrested. He never put up a fight, he never made any attempt to flee, he just went willingly. Amber sat with Shasta for a while, as they took Joseph outside, and she asked where her brother was, if he was in the car. Shasta told her that he was in heaven with mum and dad, which absolutely broke her heart. She hugged her and was telling her that she was safe and it was all okay now. She was finally free of Joseph. However, she would always be left with the torment that he did to her, the horrible things that they all went through, the fact that he murdered her 2 brothers and her mum and dad, and that just must have traumatized her. Most of the information what has happened to this family actually came from Shasta herself, including what happened to her brother after he was taken. Joseph did actually ask Shasta when she got older if she would do him one promise, and that would be that she would see him no matter where he was. And Shasta agreed to it. She said, obviously many years has passed, she's a lot older. She has been speaking to some people to possibly arrange that into happening, and when she sits down in front of him, she said that she will tell him that she forgives him, because she doesn't want this to hang over her all her life, which is really admirable. And it's such a brave thing to do, to forgive the man that literally took away all of your family and almost took your life. On the 3rd of December 2007, Joseph pled guilty to all 10 charges put against him. Joseph was sentenced to 3 death sentences as well as 3 consecutive life sentences without parole. As I said previously, Joseph also confessed to the 3 other killings that nobody knew he'd committed. Shasta had this amazing ability to stay alive. This 8-year-old girl showed more strength than some adults have. It's believed that it was actually Shasta that convinced him to go to the restaurant that day, which in turn saved her life. She was just able to connect with her captor and work on him in a way that ended up with her being rescued. And that, coupled with the quick response of Amber, allowed her to eventually be reunited with her biological father, and as of now they have this good relationship together. Shasta still has all of the pain, but she has begun to move on with her life. And she's even began her family, which her father is very much a part of. This story was just totally devastating, but also amazing, which does seem odd to say with a case like this, but it's true. Obviously, her family was brutally murdered, and that is just horrific, and it was so traumatic. Lots of people lost their lives that day. But there's also the story of a survivor in here. That brave little 8-year-old girl who just never gave up. My heart, of course, goes out to all of the family members whose life was just torn apart that day. And I'm thankful that Shasta was able to get through to him and that he wasn't able to take another innocent life. But yeah, that's the end of the case. If you guys have any suggestions you'd like me to look into, let me know. I'll look into them for you. Give me a big thumbs up if you enjoyed the video and subscribe to my channel if you enjoy this kind of content. Anyway guys, that's all I have today on the Groene Family Murders. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye!